2007 was the first time I did this outlook here. Among the key takeaways, emerging channels, mobile and social. They were emerging channels back then. Now we didn't know where they were going to go, but we knew they were going to capture some share. That was pretty good guess, because we really didn't have to go. The other thing, especially for the students here, I guess it's 7 or 8 years ago, my daughter was here as a guest when she was in high school to see, what is it I actually do for a living? Other than make shit up. And so she came and she met a woman from Forbes named Dina LaFrance, if people remember Dina. And they started chatting. And she went on to go to college and intern with Chet. And get introduced to privacy and got her marketing degree. And she's here now and she's at Forbes. So if you think about impact, you never know where that road's going to take you. All right, so coming into this year, lots of we don't know. But that is the watchword for the market. So we have stormy clouds, and then we have sunny clouds. And I don't know which one it's going to be. So we're going to give you our best estimate. For those of you who don't know us, Winterberry Group is a now 20-year-old management consultancy specializing in advertising, marketing, data, tech, and commerce. We focus on growth strategies primarily for media and the providers and suppliers in the industry, as well as for the private equity firms that invest. We cover North America and we are active in Europe as well. So, I also had somebody say, well, how do these things compare? Well, as channels emerge, we add them to our model. So if you're trying to do apples and apples from whether it's 2007 or 2010 or 20 or now, we keep adding channels as they emerge, as they start to capture share. So our model keeps getting bigger. So if you're trying to compare over time, we added this year, CTV really was broken out separately from streaming to get the subscription stuff out. We've added gaming over the last couple of years, influencer, affiliate, B2C lead gen. It's about $20 billion worth of spend going into some of those categories, CTV being the exception that has truly grown. So it's not always apples to apples, but we do look at year over year. All right, 22. I will go through this fairly quickly. 22 was 2 halves. We came out of 21 far hotter than anybody thought. Fourth quarter of 21 was probably the strongest quarter anybody has seen. We grew overall 25% last year. Digital grew 33%. Everybody was a genius. Look how well my company's doing. Look at the hockey stick. It's actually, when you have that kind of tailwind, it propelled the market. That stayed with us for the first quarter of the year. And then in May, we started to see it tailing off. And June, all of a sudden we had between the Russia shock and their attack, and then the gas price spikes, the economy started to wobble. And guess what? When the economy wobbles, our industry wobbles. They lose confidence. So much about marketing is about having confidence, and that confidence started to fall away. So it was inflation, it was with low unemployment, which puts pressure on the talent pool, which raised more prices, which makes it harder to find people to staff. Obviously 7 interest rate hikes to slow the economy, not good for us. And the recession discussion. So in 2018, 2019, every private equity assignment started off with, do you think there's going to be a recession this year or next? And then they stopped asking that question because the market was so crazy in 20 and 21. And then last summer, every engagement started saying, well, you think there's going to be a recession now? When is the recession coming? How deep? How long? Et cetera. And we're still not in a recession, but things really started to slow. You add to that the buzz that comes from the stock market, as valuations just crashed. Companies, there are digital advertising companies that went public that are trading at 1.5 times sales, 0.75, 0.5, and 2 to 3 times profit. This is a market where digital agencies for digital technology platforms traded 3 to 4 times sales, 10 to 20 times profit. But if you look at the public markets right now, they lost confidence in the economy and they lost confidence in the industry. And so that kind of like just compounds and sits on top. And the consumers started to worry about, they were spending, they started to worry about it. So all of that just kind of took us down as the year went by. So first half good, second half not so good. One of the things that we were asked a lot about as we were thinking, so historically, advertising grows 2.5 times GDP. And you can track it back for 50 years. And Mary Meeker did a huge study. We've been tracking it for years. So it was kind of noodling along with that. Then the economy, when it goes down twice as fast. And then it went off the charts, like 2020 and 2021. People asked, well, how does that fit in? It doesn't fit. There were exceptions, they were outside the norm. What we think happened this year, is that GDP is slowing into the 2s, but growth is still accelerating because of that first half. And we think for 23, we're getting back to what was normal. And we think that that actually is what you should consider going forward, that it will be a lot more normal. And 0.2% GDP growth rate says the Fed doesn't know if we're going up or going down. They have no idea, so they just kind of calling it neutral. Makes forecasting really fun. It's where we started and it's where we ended. We think we ended up 9.4. With all the channels we're going to talk about, $480 billion to spend a year now cover. So it was a good year. It may have ended kind of in a flat note, but it was still, compared to historical, there was not a 9.4 growth year between 2010 and 2018. So it was still a good year for growth. It just was nothing like what had happened. The splits, digital continues to grow a lot faster than offline, which has kind of been normal for a very long time. So underneath that story, what really happened? So we have about $10 billion in political advertising. I live in Miami. We had nothing but, if you come from here, which is not a swing state, and you move down there, you actually understand what a deluge of advertising looks like. It was drug commercial, political commercial, nasty political commercial, and just on and on and on. But it wasn't just linear TV, but it did pick that up. We also got a lot of direct mail. So as we went through the year, direct mail actually stayed pretty strong. And linear stayed strong. And unfortunately, newspaper and magazine continued to decline. Money just keeps shifting out, and we've seen massive numbers of layoffs in the news industry. I think for the magazine side, they're making up a lot of that on the digital media, but it was never going to be the same. But overall, it was a pretty good year, and the other bounce that was notable was experiential. Events started to come back. We came out of COVID, people started going back to stuff, and then it was like, okay, I've got my 4th shot, and I've got my flu shot, and I'm going to get COVID, I'm going to get the flu, so it doesn't really matter whether you're going to infect somebody or not. I didn't actually say that, but that's... But all in all, it was a good year. Direct mail had gone down, obviously, because when you freeze direct mail for a quarter in 2020, it's going to take off the top. Came back up in 21, and was up slightly this year in terms of volume, which was actually a very good sign. Again, that ramp in the first half and then tailing down a bit. Digital market, on the other hand, all right, that format went really strange. The digital market was really up all across the board, but it was not up consistently. The big bounce is CTV. CTV was a topic, and it was, oh, all the money is going to shift out of linear. Well, we just saw linear, and linear was up. So did the money shift out of linear? Absolutely not. It was money that came out of things like display. But overall, the new money coming into the market, a lot of that went into connected television, which is not without its challenges, and I'll talk about that. But search was still up, so overall it was a good year across all digital channels. But we really were watching video more than anything else. Digital performance media, so think about search and social. So we just finished a survey, and the top two channels for performance, people start with search, they add social, then they were adding CTV, or they're adding display video. Interestingly enough, they're now thinking about the other performance channel, which is called direct mail, because they're searching for performance. The other thing is, as we think about the loss of identifiers and all the privacy issues, there's been you have to have a first-party consented relationship. So if you're going to do that, guess what? You're going to change your data infrastructure. You're going to spend more time on analytics and optimization. All of that gave rise to a data market that actually outperformed the market itself. Moving on, this is definitely strange, this version. Moving on, we track the M&A markets, and our friends at Canaccord gave us the kind of a first look at what they thought. What we thought was big deals slowed. And so the total value went down, but the total number of transactions, the markets seemed to have, along with everything else, they went down from first quarter across the year. Didn't matter which segment of the industry, whether it was e-commerce, which was probably the biggest, but agency deals, holding company deals, all of that kind of contracted. But it didn't end. We are seeing a very active market. It's not the IPO market, and it's certainly not let's have a SPAC, a special purpose acquisition vehicle, and we're going to create this, fund it, and then go look for shit to buy. It was not that. That started to go away. They want real earnings. They want real growth. So while that ended, what you saw was this middle market where most of the companies in our industry live, companies that are up to about $1 billion of revenue. That's the middle for these folks. That market has stayed very robust because it's strategics doing add-ons, it's private equity still investing in platforms. When we talk to our private equity clients, they're looking at a company that's doing well now, but they're looking for the answer of what will they be doing 5 years from now when we go to sell them? Will there still be a market then? So if the market's in flux right now, they don't care because they're not selling the business for 5 years. What they care is what's going to happen over time. So private equity and venture capital still coming in. I think I saw a VC stat this morning. They poured a couple $2 billion into AI. VCs are typically 4 to 5 years ahead of the maturation of the market. They invest heavily for 2 or 3 years. They let their money ride. And those winners, usually the 20%, take off. Another 30% kind of hang out, and the others kind of go away. So they're investing now, not for just what AI is today and machine learning, but what it's going to be in 2025 and 2026. But the other part, when valuation in the public markets go down, valuation in the private markets go down as well. And we saw some pretty interesting transactions. We saw them in the data world with Ferris buying Infrature. We saw a lot of transactions with the holding companies around commerce and adding connected commerce capabilities to their platforms where they, frankly, most of them were underinvested. And then we saw some interesting things, trends. Goldman putting money into iSpot, which is a measurement currency provider for linear and CTV. VidMob, which is creative intelligence. All these things I'll talk about a little bit more. But you saw pockets of invested money still coming into our industry because there was a belief in the growth of our industry. All right. macro trends. What do we think is really driving this market? So when we talk to folks in the last quarter and the last few weeks, what we are seeing is general optimism. Because we're in this industry, so if we're pessimistic, that's really bad, because in marketing you always need to be somewhat optimistic. But they're worried about the economy. And their budgets are very dependent on how the markets are doing and frankly, how profit margins are. You know, marketing is a percentage of revenue that generally runs 7 to 9% of total revenue. If revenue slows, marketing growth slows. If profits are being compressed while revenue is growing, then they make a decision, should we keep funding marketing or do we pull it back? The initial impulse when you head towards a recessionary environment is pull it back, don't spend, focus on retention, because it costs less to retain than it does to acquire. But that pull, what they're saying right now is we're keeping our plans for growth, subject to stopping them flat. If we go into recession, so rather than having, here's the year plan that you can count on, and that they'll commit, it's, yeah, we're committing for the next 90 days. And then we'll commit for another 90 days. So here's your year plan, but know and understand that this is a 90-day commit. Yes, of course, it's always been, every contract says you have a 30-day out anyway, or whatever you said, but we're really seeing that pressure coming from the CEO, CFO suite down into the market saying, make sure your retention plans are in place. Think about engagement and experience so that you can retain the customers. Keep spending on acquisition until we tell you to stop. So if we get a stop, it's going to come from that acquisition side. So optimization, personalization, better omnichannel integration, things that you can do to get more from your dollar. That's really, you know, the message that we're taking away. It's we're not necessarily going to cut your dollar, we want more for that same. So if we grow less, or we give you less of a budget, it's still going to hit those old growth targets. So you need to be able to do that. Oh, and we're not necessarily giving you any more staff. Big story for the last couple of years has been retail media marketplaces, and not just retail, but other verticals as well. So when we think about retail media, 59% of retailers have some sort of media ad revenue now. You know, when we looked at this 2 years ago and I started to talk about it, it's like there were 100 platforms across verticals in retail. It's not just Amazon or Walmart, it's Best Buy, it's Marriott, it's Carvana to a certain extent. Some things work, some things don't. But they are taking money that was in media dollar, that was going towards media dollars and moving it. They're also taking about 1.5% of trade promotion dollars, certainly in grocery, and moving that money over. But there's questions. So the ad sales team's out there going, they're going to sell everything. Does that actually deliver a good experience? And what formats should that be in? And is the ad sales team dictating what you should have on your shelf, or is merchandising? Merchandising had always ruled. They're the ones who are committing 3, 6, 9, 12 months in advance to get product on the shelf. They matter more than these ad sales teams, because ad sales might make up 7, 8, 9% of your revenue. Lots of your profit, but only a small. Merchandising controls the rest of it. So they're wrestling, you know, the money is coming in, and it's pouring in because basically the brands on those platforms who have products are being told, yeah, you need to move those products. Started with Amazon, which gives you as a marketplace partner, you know, you can spend up to 30%. But now it's all across the board, and as we think about it, we think about, if I'm promoting my brand on that site, and people are already going to buy the brand, is this actually helping me? Is this a good use? Or should I be spending my money driving people to that brand, to that platform, as they call it? So they're looking at their own platform spend, and they're thinking, I need to understand the incrementality of the impact of the spend. McKinsey and others have said, you know, we had a market that was 20 billion, it's going to 45 billion in 22, it's going to 100 billion of spend. What's your ability to spend is like a fifth of all marketing spend today. So not necessarily sold on that. And we don't track retail spend as a category because it's either display or search on a platform, so you wind up double counting. So you don't see a specific number because we disaggregate it. But this is an area that money is going to keep flowing into, but they got to get the metrics right, and they got to avoid fraud. And understanding incrementality is going to be the primary trend of 2023. You're getting my money, but you better tell me how it's really working. The third thing that we're thinking about is direct mail. What we started to see are a whole bunch of new-to-market direct mailers. People who'd never done direct mail before. They were direct-to-consumer brands. And they said, oh yeah, we're in search and social. What other performance media channels should I enter? And hundreds of brands started to do direct mail. Those of us who've been around for a while, of course we know how to do direct mail. Well, if you were digital only, and all of a sudden you're now entering this channel, it's like, what do I do? It doesn't work the way the other channels work. So we've spent a lot of time kind of unbundling it and thinking about what's driving this. Well, one of the things, it used to be 5 years ago when D2C started to move forward, social was your most cost-effective entry point. Well, if you look at these CPMs in social, they have gone through the roof. Google search CPMs have gone up. So the cost of starting a brand or building a brand on search and social has gone up significantly. And even though direct mail is an expensive channel, it's become a more attractive channel because you can actually say, yeah, I know how many net new accounts I'm going to get. It's a very measurable channel with a lot of people with a lot of experience. But it's a performance media channel. People don't say, oh, direct mail, performance media. They think about digital. It's a performance media channel. It should be thought of that way. We, in partnership with our friends at the post office, dropped a 500-person survey over break. And the third most important channel that showed up, direct mail, right after search and social. Within the direct mail category, one of the things that we're watching and paying a lot of attention to is trigger marketing. So this is automated, and there are a couple ways. It's not just somebody comes to your website, we target them with mail instead of following them around the web. It's event-based triggers. It's behavioral triggers. It's what happens on your file. So it's not just that web visit, but it's been outperforming. Look, retargeting always outperforms. But even at a high package price, it's outperforming and it's delivering sales. And that's actually what matters. So we've seen a steady increase, and you're seeing platforms the direct mail production providers get better at automating the production delivery, and you're seeing the data companies do a better job with analytics on mining the data side. Those two things coming together. It's still early for this channel, so we haven't seen how it's really going to develop, but it was an idea, a couple of years ago, and it's now becoming pretty interesting. We're watching B2B, so that's another area. We're working on our B2B model this morning. So we are doing a B2B white paper, which we are kicking off next week, which we will present with the ANA in June. So we're doing a deep dive, because when we started to hear last year, was all this conversation about, it's not just B2C, which we knew, but B2B is going through a really systemic shift from experiences only and sales-driven to marketing qualified leads, and understanding the relationship between MQLs and SQLs, and using technology like ABM and B2B demand gen to drive the channel. Our early thinking, and early meaning like between 9 and 11 this morning, is that this 13% that we were thinking B2B might be up 13. We're thinking it's going to possibly double or triple the growth of consumer ad spend in 2023. Preliminary numbers, we'll lock it down in the next 6 days before I present this with the ANA. But that's actually what we think is happening. But it's better automation, it's more marketing thinking, entering I ran a digital out-of-home software company for about 7 years. I was head of sales and marketing. I didn't know anything about marketing, but I would go out and sell and do conferences and pitch people, and we'd send some postcards out and make brochures. We didn't think about marketing, we thought about sales. We are thinking a whole lot more about marketing, and that's probably the biggest shift, is rebalancing experiential across demand gen, programmatic, ABM, etc. The biggest story of the year, CTV and linear. So CTV was supposed to go from 14.4 billion in 2021 to 19 point something at the last year in January. It's finishing somewhere close to $21 billion. That is massive growth in a channel. And then obviously it's not stealing from linear, it's the extension of linear. And it's finding hard to reach audiences. Lots of challenges. If you're a linear TV buyer, you have your media agency that you work with, and they model based on DMAs, and they use different data sets and different segmentations and different analytics. Now you're the digital video buyer who says CTV is mine. It's not yours. This is mine. And we're people-based, some household, and moving to household-based, and we're a different set of data scientists and a different segmentation. Now you're the agency in between this going, okay, what am I going to do? There's two agencies. Somebody's got to bring them together so I can do a unified buy, because the media companies, when you go to the upfronts and you talk to Paramount, et cetera, you can now buy a package that's got linear and all the CTV extensions. So they're unifying the selling, got silos in the buying. We've got to bring that together. That's part of the problem. The other is Nielsen fell out of favor on the linear side because they weren't getting the numbers right. They were undercounting things. They needed to rebuild their models. iSpot, Video Amp, others came from the CTV side and said, hey, we can measure. There's been a discussion of, okay, are we going to go back to a single currency that everybody uses to measure these, e.g. Nielsen, or we're going to have multi-currency? We are going to multi-currency. They're going to use more providers to see how they all perform. So you may have a Nielsen, an iSpot, and a Video, or a ComScore, something like that. So lots of complexity in how we measure it, more costs that go into the data bucket, which is a good thing. But we have fraud, people faking. It's not just programmatic, but if I can make it appear like I've got a TV, but I'm really on a mobile device, CTV CPMs are far, far higher. So you're fooling the market. The other thing, I think iSpot and I forget the other company that was on the other side of this, they found $1 billion worth of advertisements that played while the TV was off and the set-top box was on. So nobody was seeing it, but it was running because the set-top box said it was running. So there are issues. Biggest issue for the future of this, I have 5 buying paths. I can come to your set via a streaming app, your Peacock app or something like that. I can come to your set via the broadband ISP. I can come to your set via the set-top box provider. I can come in through a gaming or streaming device. I can come in directly to a smart TV. I can buy on any of those that are each looking at this independently. And I got to figure out, how do I dedupe this? And who actually would get the credit for it? And I can go to LG or I can go to Samsung, they're going to sell me the ads. And this is probably one of the top 2 issues, is there are so many paths to the TV, it's just no longer a straight shot. And somebody's got to figure out all these channels and optimize against it. The other part is, it takes identity. Now this is household-based identity. We went, hey, it's all about people. Well, CTV is about the living room and the big screen, as is linear. And so now I'm back to households, which maybe we're restarted in direct mail, but it's back to households, who's in the room, who's not in the room, what else are they doing. And we've got identity, many of these identity platforms had started being based on people. They actually started being based on households, then they were based on people. Now I've got to link the people and the house together. And there are like 90 different ones. Every brand is building their own first-party identity spine that they can use and extend. They can also use on their own website. So I need interoperability. I've got, how do I make all of these interoperable? How do I build identity reference sets that can cross over? What are the standards in that market? We're going to spend, it's not are we going to spend money on it? That's not the question. How do we make it work? So I got all of this complexity, yet at the same time, it's video engagement, we're going to move spend. So the spend is going up, and there's a whole lot of cloudiness of the we'll get to it later. But we think that sort of get to it later is 23, and will continue through 24. Speaking of the loss of identifiers and what Apple did with ATT, privacy regulation, this push, so all of this on, how do I know who you are? I need a first-party relationship. And it needs to be a consented first-party relationship. And there's no national standards, of course. And there are guidelines that are fuzzy. Just okay, what guidelines should I be following? If I, get California right, that was kind of the thinking. Let's get California right, it covers everybody, until Colorado and Virginia raise their head. People talk about the death of the cookie, 50 or 60% of cookies are gone already. Doesn't matter anymore. That's not a story that we're following. Cookies will just slowly go away. Whether the browsers do it or privacy kills it, they're going away. Third-party cookies, not first-party cookies. But it drives more use of context, which is more privacy compliant, and a lot more model solutions. When we look at the map, do we think we'll get, we knew we weren't getting anything in 22 in terms of national. We kind of thought maybe 23, when I spoke to the ANA this summer, that was, we're going to get it in 23 no matter who goes in. And as of the last couple of weeks, it's are you watching what goes on in Congress? Nothing will come out of that list that they can agree on. So we're going to watch the FTC, and they're really good at fines. And we're going to watch how Colorado and Virginia and California enforcement, forget what's written, it's what do they decide to enforce? It was the same thing we went through with GDPR. GDPR had fuzz all over the place in terms of interpretation until the fines started coming out. That's when you actually know how they're interpreting it, and you go to where the fines are or try to avoid them. So privacy, not optimistic about anything national this year. Chet, if you got a better idea, let me know. But what's happening is all of this focus on first-party data and doing a better job of personalization, engagement, says, where am I going to invest right now? There was a long time it was all about Salesforce and Adobe. For the last couple of years, what we watched is investment in CDPs. I've got to do a better job of data management. The CDPs have analytics built in, and they can take identity. So they are replacing the CRMs each year. And that has been a big story, and it's a good chunk of what's driving growth. The data market has been growing in line with digital media and with direct mail, but the actual infrastructure of marketing has been growing above. And what we're being told is it will continue to grow. We're also starting to watch clean rooms. So I need clean rooms so that I can either not move my data at all, or I can move my data somewhere where I can commingle with somebody else's, do my analytics, get ready for my activation. So when we started to look at advanced television in our paper last spring, and what we're seeing right now is universal adoption of clean rooms. But you can't just have one. I need one that might be used internally between brands within an organization based on permission. I need one that I'm going to use with my media partners. I need one that I'm going to use for identity and my personalization on others. I would like to just pick one, except for the fact that every brand is picking the one. And there are lots of different clean room solutions. So if you're on the media side of this, you're going, well, I need 3 or 4. In steps Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. Well, they all have their own proprietary clean rooms, and they're also using their platforms for compute and storage and saying, hey, you can put your clean room on top of us, and now you just move it within your Amazon cloud. So it goes from S3 bucket to S3 bucket. They are determining where the clean room market is going to go. Identity will be required to be added. They are not going there. But in terms of the storage and compute side, they are actually going to be the foundation. And so clean rooms have moved on platform with the big platforms. But again, lots of investment. How do I make clean rooms, CDPs, identity, how do I make all of this work together? And it is driving the market. But we're really watching what Amazon, Google, and Microsoft do. Last couple of slides. Talent. Last year I talked about the Great Resignation. Talent hasn't really loosened up, but the wage inflation that we saw in the first half of 22 started to taper in the second half. It's still a little elevated, but what we've seen is hiring has started to loosen up. So the topic has gone through who do we hire and how the hell do we train them? How many days should they be in the office? And I've sat on a bunch of panels with a lot of CEOs, and it is every single board meeting I go to, is how many days are you going to be back in the office? We picked 3. We think 3 was the right number. Others are saying, well, it's 2. Some people say they don't want to come back to the office. As we start to see unemployment go back up from 3.5, 4.6, 4.7, the people who own the business, Bob Iger going back to Disney and saying 5 days in. You know, Elon Musk going to 5 days. If you don't want to work 5 days in the office, go away. It really comes down to what you do for a living. Strategy, creative, there are things where you really need to be in the room together, other tasks where you don't. And if you're doing multiple tasks like most of us do, you sometimes need to be there and you sometimes don't. So, but this is like a raging debate, and it is not played out. I do think that we will get through 23, and as we get into 24, that it will actually stabilize. And it will be a hybrid model, you know, for most companies. But it's painful. The other thing that we found is people who were new to the industry, people who had come out of school right into COVID, people who might have worked for a year, COVID hit, and they were out of the office. A lot of people got very used to being at home. And they didn't know how to come back to an office and develop those interpersonal skills. And then there was a good chunk of people, you know, many of them parents with kids who were younger, et cetera, in their teens, were like, I really like the fact that I could just skate out whenever I need to skate out. It worked for their lifestyle. So pulling some of these back is kind of hard. They feel like you're taking away a privilege or a right. Actually, that's not the case. So lots of conversation for the next year. The other thing that was really interesting, as the market started to slide last year, all the holding companies are reporting their numbers, and their forecasts are going up. So marketing spend is going down. Everybody just says marketing spend, agency spend should go down, right? It's a percentage of media. Well, it didn't happen. So last year, market agency growth, so we track our agency model is completely separate from our channels model. So we've got a whole different model. And what we saw was about 8.5% growth versus a 9.3. So they kind of grew in line, except we expected to exceed the growth of marketing spend next year. It's being driven by the fact that there are so many damn channels to track. There are so many, you know, I looked at our 2007 outlook, which was my first outlook, which basically said mobile and social were going to be the next big channels. But the point is actually that we were tracking like 12 channels. And now we're tracking like 30. And if you're the marketer, you've just been told, watch your budget, don't invest in headcount. Obviously in the tech world, we're seeing layoffs. But do more with the same dollar says, go to your agency and tell them, oh, go figure out how to do more with the same dollar. So complexity, spending constraints, et cetera, is pushing work back to the agency. Or you're seeing hybrid models of I've got an in-house agency and I've got an external. What you're not seeing is in-house only. Like that is not the conversation. So it's how do I balance what's in and what's out? But as it gets complex, and when people start talking about ChatGPT and they're talking about Web3 and the metaverse and all this shit, it's like, yeah, somebody else will figure it out. And we're not going to give you a lot of money for it, but you'll get a lot of attention from making those presentations. So we actually think the agency market's in a really good place. Okay, so I had to get to AI and machine learning. One, in October and November, we decided we were going to write a white paper on marketing analytics, which we are in the process of doing. It will be released the first week of April and presented at the ANA conference. A lot of it was, we started to see a lot of machine learning applications move from ideas to reality. And then, beginning of December, OpenAI announces ChatGPT, general availability, it can do everything. And we have been inundated with articles. So the very first thing is a little bit of level setting. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are not the same thing. So artificial intelligence being that top line, and this is, yes, this deck will be available later so you can actually read this and not have to read it right now. It's how computers perceive, synthesize, and infer information on a machine as opposed to intelligence from us. That's artificial intelligence. There are a couple of subcategories underneath it. The first being machine learning, where you build a model and you train it with lots and lots of data. It does take your bias because there are humans telling it how to train, how to learn. But it's really good for paid media, for website optimization. Very much current real-time data streaming at it, learning continuously, optimizing. Personalization, market research, predictive, prescriptive. Those are all real hardcore machine learning use cases. Conversational AI, popularized now by ChatGPT, very good for customer service, content generation, creative development, trends. Yes, I tried to get ChatGPT to write my outlook. What I got back was, the market is positive, because eMarketer said so in 2020, because the training set underneath that is from 2021. It didn't have anything current, and it didn't really go. So for writing my outlook, it was a non-starter. I did try. For saying what, if you ask me what AI is used for, it's actually pretty good, because a lot of that content came out in 2019. It's not new, but there are areas where it's going to really work in content, in conversation, in customer service. But it's not without a couple of issues. So you can watch the use of conversational AI and say, all right, is the information correct? Are we going to get a whole lot of misinformation created by machines? That's just not true. We have ethics concerns. We have organizational compliance. We have the New York City schools saying you cannot use this in school. You have Google taking a look and saying, for good reason, yeah, if it was created by a machine, I'm not so sure we're going to put it on the front page of search. And ultimately it comes down to, do we trust what is coming out of that black box? Because it is a black box. And how much transparency can we get? So as much as we are, if there's not 100 articles since Monday in our industry, it's really about how do we think this is going to unfold. Early stage for conversational AI. That being said, there are a couple of areas where we're seeing a proliferation of coverage. Companies like AdTheorent, built their DSP around, they built the machine learning first and built the workflow around it second. Others like MediaMath and Criteo, Trade Desk, etc., they built their workflows and then enhanced it by putting machine learning in. So programmatic buying of media, real application, machine learning, not AI. So we're starting to really see that proliferate because I can look at any data and I can infer what the right bid should be. I don't need a first-party cookie or a third-party cookie. I'll use whatever's available and make it and model that to make the right guess. We started to see it, and maybe some of the most interesting stuff. We were working with Shamrock and Big Mob this summer, and they built a creative intelligence platform. They take all the data that's coming off the social platforms, they run it through their machine learning, and it predicts what you should put in that video and helps you edit it. So that you can say, if Bruce goes this way, it doesn't perform. If Bruce is looking at you, it performs. If there's a dog in the picture, it performs this. If there's a cat, and allows you to swap those out with all of that real-time information coming off the platforms. That's creative intelligence. It's not doing creative. It's saying, where should that be in the advertisement, in that promotion, in that content? So we're watching, and there are a whole bunch of players in that market that are automating the process of learning to do a better job of creative. They are not replacing creatives. None of this stuff is great for coming up with the next great idea. But for customization, versioning, optimization, creative intelligence is something that we feel really strongly, again, based on machine learning. Market research, we're starting to see product innovation and taking programmatic panels, all that panel data, they're pulling it in, and you can do rapid testing for product innovation. You can do go-to-market testing, advertising testing. So market research has started to really, I think they call it res tech, research tech. They've started to enable themselves. These are real-world cases that work today. 2018, 2019, they were on the drawing table, they were being adopted. 2022, they were really being tested and rolled out, and we really are optimistic. So a little less about ChatGPT, a little bit further out, but real-time machine learning right now. All right, I'm mostly on time today. 2023, what are we thinking about? So we are thinking that GDP growth, according to the Fed, will be about 0.2%, which is flat. We think it's 5.89% growth, down from 9.4. We think the FTC is going to continue to go after the large platform players, social, and we may or may not have TikTok next year. The story here is very much about money shifting within providers. TikTok, social itself slowed in growth, but TikTok took a lot of that growth. Meta has been feeling the pain from that. Microsoft has said, yeah, we're putting $10 billion into OpenAI. We're going to embed ChatGPT across not just Azure, but across Word, Excel, etc. That actually could be maybe some of the most game-changing stuff in my presentation for 2025. Not likely my presentation for this year. We do think that we're still a little bit decoupled on ad spend growth, unless you get a lot of profit compression from the public companies and the large enterprises. Regulatory enforcement, we're trying to decide, which channels is that going to be a headwind for and really pull things back, and where is it a tailwind? We don't know yet, and we're not optimistic that we're going to know. And then we have all the macro stuff that threw everybody's forecasts off. Last year there was a March, everybody did their December, we do our January. And we look at everybody else's December, and we look at all our proprietary models, and we come out with this. Last year, we didn't think fourth quarter was that strong. And it was stronger than everybody thought. So there was a March revision to forecast. And then every year you get a June revision. And then this year we have a September revision, an October revision, a December revision, because it's like trying to catch a moving target with this economy. Because we have no control over geopolitics and its impact. Will Europe, if the weather is warm in Europe, it changes the economic outlook for the continent and the UK, which then impacts how our economy also does. So if the weather's warm, we're good. If the weather's extra cold, we could be bad. It's like that kind of year of we don't know. Hence, stormy clouds and brightening skies all at once. What we think linear TV takes it on the chin. It is about cord cutting, which is continuing. It is about a lack of major event. We don't have an election, so all of a sudden, a whole bunch of money comes right out. We're off here on the election side. CTV is still taking money. Now it isn't taking money from linear, or is linear actually dropping money? Linear is also faced with Amazon buying the rights to what was DirecTV. So it went from the linear bucket, now it's over onto the CTV bucket for NFL games, for the NFL season package. You know, you've got Apple with MLB games. So all of a sudden, these digital people and linear is actually going to feel the pain. And it's hard in this environment to raise your prices. I'll try, but as the reach compresses, there's only so far you can push price, especially in a tight market. When the markets were exploding in 21, they all just jacked up the price. You can't cover that forever. We're optimistic about direct now. For the year, we think we still have some growth in the channel, some of it being share shift, some of it being, inflationary costs. We're not optimistic about radio. We're not optimistic. I haven't been optimistic about newspaper magazines since maybe my first presentation. So, but overall, it's flat. It looks like the economy. Traditional really does mirror the economy. On the digital side, growth rates are decelerating. It's not growth has stopped. It is just not growing as fast. It's still capturing the new money, but if it was growing 13% and it was growing 30% and it had been growing steadily in the mid-teens, digital's getting big, and so it starts to come back to earth. And now money starts to move around. And whoever's got the best platform, technology, media, social crowd, is going to take more share. CTV in for another, $5 billion increase. So that one keeps going. Everything else kind of moderates. So on the digital side, you're going to have to work harder to grow the same way you were, which is part of why valuations have come down, because you're no longer looking at markets that grow 30%. Because part of valuation is a forward-looking view. So still good growth. Like on a historical basis, in terms of advertising and marketing spend, that's still really good growth. But compared to what it's been, harder to grow off big numbers. The data market too. We've seen, CDP investment, when we started tracking in 2018, it was just taking off. 19, 20, 21, 20 have all been really strong years of that conversion from CRM to CDP and making it more at that center. Clean rooms, it will go up. The challenge is, are the big platforms who sell compute and storage, and the market looks and say, how is Azure doing, how is AWS doing, et cetera, and their stock price is very tied to the growth there, are they just going to say, do I give away the clean room technology? If you use my platform, I'll give it away so they can keep selling or providing credits, et cetera. So we believe that some of the clean room, while we're going to see universal adoption, because everybody's going to need one, how much money will we make on the clean room? We make money on the data going in the clean room, the analytics on the clean room, but how much money can you truly make on the clean room itself? We don't know. And then it goes, does it move, does it not move, et cetera, et cetera. So we think that the market, in line with the digital media channels slowing, and the offline channels slowing, the market starts to slow down. 7% growth is still a very good number. So overall, we think that we get to 60%, 40% split. We've been watching this for a long time. Yes, we keep adding channels to make digital look better. But realistically, we think it's about a 60-40 split, which probably mirrors most people's media consumption habits. The days of saying, oh, mobile deserves more money because we get 2% of ad dollars and we've got X% of viewing time. We think we're actually getting to a place where the ad dollars are really following the viewing habits. So we think we're kind of in balance. We think we're going to go back much more towards what the old normal was. But overall, pretty optimistic about the year right now, at this point in time. And that's it. Thank you. I will take a couple of questions if you have questions. Yes.
So on one of your slides, you're projecting 2023 total ad spend to grow 5.89%. And on the same slide, you're also projecting US GDP to grow at 0.2%. How do you reconcile the two? Why do you think there's going to be decoupling?
It's still decoupled. It hasn't all the way come back. And part of that is the fact that media spend is still shifting. And the optimism of the market and the pessimism of the Fed are not in alignment yet. When we look back, maybe we grew faster, and maybe GDP was a little faster, and ad spend, held where we think it is, or it may very well be that GDP grows slower and ad spend grows slower. But there's still disconnect, like there has been for the last 3 years. We are not back to normal. We are getting back.
Just follow up. So historically, ad spend is 2 percentage points higher than the GDP.
No, 2 times.
2 times.
So if GDP was growing 3%, you would expect ad spend to be somewhere between 6 and 8. It's 2.5 times. Mary Meeker, when she was at Morgan Stanley, she looked back to the 20s. God knows where the data came from. But she tracked this all the way through to through the 90s. And we picked it up because we're now tracking this for the last 20 years. And it held true for a really long time, 2.5 times. So we think it kind of reverts back. But yeah, we built our models to go back that far. Anybody else? Yes?
You might not be bullish on radio. Can you speak to rumors of the decline in podcasting?
We're not seeing a decline. We're seeing a tapering of growth and a tapering of forecasts. It's now lumped into that digital audio bucket. We used to break up podcasting versus digital radio, et cetera. And it's all kind of in digital audio. What's happened is a lot of the original podcast companies have been bought by the Spotify's, et cetera, and now are rolled into that offering. And there's also only so many hours a day to listen to podcasts. So I think what we're seeing is a market that's gone through consolidation and bundling. Not necessarily, it's just hard to think of it, and I talked to an agency that specializes in this, it's hard to think of it as a different channel. It's part of my digital audio buy. Yes?
Do you have any data on conferences or trade shows?
Experiential's going up. We're back. We're here. We weren't here for 2 years. And if you notice, so the CES crowd a week ago, it didn't go back to its 170,000 peak, but there were 100,000 people. And everybody is scheduling events and conferences. I now look at my calendar and it's like, I should be in a different city at a conference every week. I never get work done. I could just go to conferences. So the conference calendar has filled up again. It has come back hybrid. So portions of them will be streamed. Portions will be only in person. We've also heard conversations about events where they're going to charge you less to be in person and more for the stream. So I've heard a whole bunch of things, but we're feeling pretty bullish that people are back and traveling. Ultimately, you get sales done out of that. It's not your primary promotion channel like it was when I was running channels and selling stuff. It is now complementary. It's a way to close business. It's a way to build leads. My friends who are at NRF, I've got a bunch of clients at the Retail Federation conference this week or so. We're getting really good leads. So it's come back and people are here. Bullish on that. Still will take till probably 2025 to be where it was. Yeah.
I was just wondering, you kind of mentioned it very briefly, but what's your thoughts about the whole metaverse, like marketing on the metaverse kind of taking off in a whole different area? I mean, I may be well out of my element because of my age, but a lot of people are, looking at that as that's the emerging marketing channel where it's really going to pick up twice to what today is to, let's say, 2025. Thoughts on that?
There are a couple of things. We have a lot of conversations about this topic internally and with our clients. Part of it is technology. You need faster technology that's lighter. Like I remember putting on one of the first versions of Oculus at a DMA board meeting. You go, all right, this is just not a good thing. It's come a long way, but you need better compute and better visualization. So we think technology maturation makes it much more real 25, 26. The impact of this is also in the gaming and advertising side of gaming.
Okay.
They're talking, we're still a couple of years from having the right technology, less about the software, but they're going in that direction. The other thing is, there's a segment of people there. So if you want a big brand experience for multiple Gen Z, Gen Y, etc., that's not the place you're going to get that at this point. I did review a presentation last spring where somebody was talking about digital twinning. And he went through and he goes, what do you think? I was like, well, could you actually step back and tell me what digital twinning is? So you are basically building a metaverse version of a real life environment. So if I have the city of New York, there's a city of New York in the metaverse that I can, walk around, experience, etc. But it's how do I relate those two environments for retail stores? So I have a retail store where I could do a really good scotch tasting, and then in the metaverse, I can't actually drink the scotch, so it sucks. But other than that, it's this notion of you can replicate the experience in a twinned environment. You can also do all sorts of things, population, social dynamics. I left a lot of things on the cutting room floor as I tried to fit this into an hour. But if we think about it, I think digital twinning applications, where you can try the experience in the offline, in the online before you come to experience it, or you can experience it in the real world and then go re-experience portions of it. That stuff, I think, comes back more than some of the 3D, technology that's harder. But the displays, the tech has to get better. But we're seeing good confidence 3 to 5 years from now. Lots of experimentation. And yes, influencers are still growing, and creators are finding ways to make more money with it. That also got cut this year. All right. Thank you very much.